Thank you, panel. This is great. It's this time that we have our audience call in and will write in and submit questions. And we've had a lot of activity over the last hour and a half, everyone, and thank you very much for submitting your questions. Since we have over 100 questions, we only have time to answer 10. So panelists ask that you can keep your answers back to about 2 minutes so we can get through all the questions in time. So our first question is from Amy in New York. So Amy asks, do all 50 states have some statute or common law on the right of publicity?
The answer to that is, I believe, yes. Some sort of recognition of right of publicity, but there is a big swing as to how protective, whether there's a post-mortem right, and whether it's a statutory protection or just a common law protection.
And how long as well, the point you made earlier, how long that protection lasts can vary significantly from state to state.
Great. The next question is our first one from overseas. Hideki, all the way from Japan, asks, if a celebrity or famous athlete from a foreign country has built up significant commercial value in the United States and dies as a citizen resident of the foreign country, can the IRS tax that decedent?
That's a very interesting question, and it goes back to the one we've been asking all day, which is, what is the property right, right? So generally, the US government cannot tax the assets of a non-citizen, non-resident that are not situated in the United States. And generally, intangible assets would be deemed to be situated in the jurisdiction of domicile where they died, and so wouldn't be taxable. But I think it all turns on how we characterize this property right, whether it is situate in the United States or not.
Next, we have a question from Barbara in Illinois. Would it have made a difference or changed the arguments in the Michael Jackson case if higher estate tax value was placed on the return than a significant discount taken?
Would it have made a difference if a higher value was placed on the return and then a discount taken? Trying to understand the question. I think the question is, did it raise some issues because the value was so low? And keep in mind, we're only talking about the name and likeness piece at $2,000. There was a music catalog. There were two different entities with music catalogs. One held the Michael Jackson catalog. One held actually a Beatles catalog. So there was significant value. You were going to get audited regardless. So would it have mattered to not put $2,000? I think the answer is no, it would not have mattered. But in other situations where that is the sole asset and it's maybe not somebody as recognizable as Michael Jackson, if it's a businessman, do I think it's a good idea to value a very successful company from somebody that you may have never heard of before and value it at close to zero? Probably not. You're probably going to get audited, right? So I think it's very, very important. We all understand that valuations isn't an exact science. It's a reasonable range. But within that reasonable range, you should try to be within the reasonable range. Otherwise, you're going to raise some eyebrows and you're going to get scrutiny and you may get valuation penalties.
And I think that's a strategic question, what to report on the return, which you're going to be limited to some extent. You've got to have a good faith basis and a reasonable basis, if not more, for putting a number on a tax return, which in this context will typically involve some type of an appraisal. And you can, to Carson's point, have an aggressive appraisal or a conservative appraisal. And the more conservative you are, i.e. the higher value you're reporting, the less likelihood the IRS is going to question that. But in this context, there's going to be a range of numbers there that are all reasonable to put on a tax return and probably all substantial authority for that reporting position. So you do have options. The strategy there, I think you could probably debate, and I'm not sure that really has that much income or impact at the end of the day. The court's going to decide what the value is, and if the return said one thing, obviously we saw in the Michael Jackson estate from the earlier slide that by the time they got to trial, both sides were in completely different positions than they had been at the time that the return was filed.